The date is Friday, August 5th, and you're listening to Entertain This, a thought-provoking podcast encapsulating all things entertainment. How do you feel about a tale of revenge, trying to rescue your legacy? What about a tale of acceptance, knowing that your size isn't what makes you, you? Do you like a tricky tale that leaves you wondering what'll come next? How about a love story between a princess and a pirate? You know what? I'll throw them all in for you. This week, we talk about a story and Michael's perfect movie, The Princess Bride. So enjoy! Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to your favorite show on the internet, encapsulating all things entertainment. It's Entertain This.
Entertain This.
As always, I'm Alex.
I'm Michael.
And I'm Patrick.
Wait.
Who?
Wait. Not as always. Different this time.
Oh no.
Not the same. It's not Chloe. It's Patrick now.
Oh, no.
Still no Nick.
No
What I'm
Nick.
hearing. But these randos keep popping up in the studio, taking his spot. We'll let it happen.
Yes, indeed.
All right, Patrick, if that is your name, who are you?
Well, I'm some just random guy. They decided to pick me up on the random side of the street in Cincinnati, you know. But no, in seriousness, my name's Patrick. I am a huge fan of the show. Just to fuck you guys.
Yeah, you don't have to.
You don't have to butter us up.
You don't have to lie. You're already on.
But in all seriousness, I love Star Wars. I'm a huge fan of Marvel. I love everything when it comes to anything nerdy. So I'm excited to show everybody my 2 cents of what I have to say.
And he just watched Top Gun for the first time a couple of weeks ago.
In my basement with them, yeah. The
awesome.
First time ever.
All right. I think you've passed the entry exam, so I'll allow it. You're welcome to your hosting spot on Entertain This. We don't know how long it's going to last. Like we said, Nick is still on sabbatical. It may be a permanent sabbatical. We're kind of waiting to hear from him to find out. But in the meantime, thank you so much, Patrick, for filling in.
Thank you guys for having me.
Of course. So that's your first rodeo, Pat. So we're going to go a little soft on you, and I'll give you kind of the rundown. So every week here on the show, one of us will come up with a topic for the rest of us to sort of discuss while the conversation is led by the one who brought the topic. Lucky for you, you'll be going not this week nor next week, but the week after that. So you got 2 weeks to get ready for your episode and your time to shine.
Awesome. I'll have to knock everybody's socks off now that I got some time to do it all.
Absolutely. Now, in the meantime, it is actually Michael's week.
Whoa, no way.
I'm going to throw it on you right now. I didn't remind you this morning. So I'm here to ask the question on everyone's mind. Michael, you have a topic for us?
I do, in fact. And this is one that I went back. So I'm not doing a video game this week, to everyone's surprise.
And
done a video game for the last 4 weeks in a row of my topic. So time to mix it up. Taking things back to a movie that I first discovered when I was a small baby child, Michael. Michael. One that to this day still holds a very special place in my heart for a multitude of reasons, and is one of the few movies that I consider to be perfect in every way.
Is it Top Gun 2?
Possibly. I haven't seen it yet.
Is it The Fifth Element?
Never seen The Fifth Element, actually. No, this one is a movie that I was shown by my childhood friend, The Princess Bride. A movie that I think... Who here has seen The Princess Bride?
Oh, yes.
I mean, it's my wife's favorite movie, so of course I've seen it.
It's like saying, who here has seen the inside of their eyelids?
That's a deep question. Because it's dark and like you can't see anything when your eyes are shut.
Are we going to do this? You're telling me you've never sat in the sun and closed your eyes and been like, wow, everything's red.
I mean, Kind of, but also does that count as seeing the inside of your eyelids or seeing light shining through the inside of your eyelids?
I don't want to debate this with you.
I mean, he does have a point.
No, he doesn't. No, he does not have a point.
It's kind of like saying, like, if you hold a piece of paper up to your eyeball, are you like actually seeing the paper at that point, or are you seeing the light behind the paper?
No, you're seeing the paper because you're seeing the light that's casted onto it.
I mean, yeah,
if you poke a hole in the paper and you look through that hole, then your question has some sort of ground.
I'll let you win this one.
Good. Because this was going to be the whole episode.
Cool.
2 hours of who's going to argue and win the most.
Yeah, that's True. About how it goes. But yeah, so The Princess Bride. So you all have seen it. So if you could give me your all's just quick impressions of The Princess Bride.
Very quotable movie.
Oh, extremely. Yeah, very. Extremely quotable movie. My first impressions are a framed narrative is actually my favorite form of storytelling. Yeah. And this is like one of the scholarly examples of a framed narrative.
So for anyone who doesn't know, Alex, can you describe what a framed narrative is?
Yeah. So the basic idea of a framed narrative is there is a story that is being told that is placed inside of the frame that is another story being told. So the idea being
Inception.
Yeah. So the idea being that the frame is, in this case, the grandfather telling a story to his sick grandson. Mm-hmm. But the actual picture inside of the frame is the story of the Princess Bride.
Yep, exactly. And the Princess Bride being a like fantasy Renaissance era story that like a childhood story that the grandpa is telling. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's also got this unique writing style that I love that I call the fuck it style.
Yeah.
Because there's a certain point in writing where you've written so much serious, like down to the heart, written from your soul shit that eventually you just write something called the fuck it, like the fuck it script, where you just go nuts and you just write ridiculous stuff, long soliloquies, terrible monologues, situations of wit that kind of don't make sense. Yeah. And it's just incredible. And that's everything this script is.
It kind of reminds me, and I thought of this earlier, it kind of reminds me of like the Monty Python-esque style.
Yeah. It's like it reaches right. It takes itself seriously to a point where then the author says fuck it and it delves into parody. Mm-hmm. Which like kind of brings up a funny thing about this movie, in that like it is an adaptation of a book. Mm-hmm. And that's something that most people don't know about it. It was originally a book by William Goldman, and that kind of brings into question of like, anytime you have any adaptation of any sort, it brings into question of like, okay, what is from the original source material and what is from what is new to this adaptation? And that kind of comes along and becomes a contentious part about like, why do we care so deeply about adaptations in the first place? I mean, we've all seen a bad adaptation before.
Shout out to you, Lightning Thief.
Yeah.
Yeah. That movie was absolutely terrible.
Uh-huh. Yeah. More like shit out, am I right?
Other notable bad adaptations would be like any of the new live action Disney movies. Let's see. I mean,
the live action Lion King that was actually just CGI, but no one wants to talk about it.
Right. It's a cartoon just in another sense.
There wasn't even a little bit of live action in that.
Yeah, live action animals talking. Oh God. But yeah, it's in my opinion though, like The Princess Bride. So let's take a look at like what is the difference between, like, what are some of the differences between the book and the movie?
Nice.
Because not everything that translates from book and that can exist only in book form actually translates to movie or visual depiction.
Yeah, you'd be surprised how cheap ink is and how expensive practical effects are.
Exactly.
You could be like my wife, who likes the book better than anything that the movies could offer. So
my wife, am I right?
My wife.
But yeah, so
sorry,
go ahead.
But Pat, your wife's like big into Harry Potter, and it's like the perfect example of just giving up so much to make it into a movie. You miss out on a lot of the charm that came with the books. So I could totally see her being like way into books and then being a little bit jaded about the idea of movie adaptations.
Exactly. And I think the Harry Potter franchise, like you said, is like a perfect for that.
Yeah. So. I mean, there's just so many affordances that books can make that movies cannot. And like you said, ink is cheap, practical effects are not.
That's an Alex Steele original, by the way. If anyone quotes me on that, I want my name attached to it.
Or some say patent pending, buddy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like books they can take the time to really go in depth on certain characters or events or any part of its story that it needs to explain, where sometimes you just got to get across something that takes 30 pages of a book in 30 seconds of a movie. A lot of times that does not go over well.
You mean like walking around like in The Hobbit?
Exactly. Yep. Which is like funny because my two perfect movies in my mind are both adaptations of books that have to make a lot of affordances.
Can I guess?
Yeah.
Princess Bride, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
Lord of the Rings is the other one.
Yes, it is.
Because that book they walk.
Yeah.
It's a book about a really long walk.
So for those who don't know, my wife is a person who loves
We get
books.
It. You're married.
Yeah, man. Don't rub it in.
Sorry.
But so for that being said, I mean, there's literally books everywhere in my house. The one book that she has never finished.
Real fire hazard.
Yeah, I know. The one book that she hasn't finished is Lord of the Rings.
So I can't really blame her, to be honest.
Nah.
I, the gracious host of this now 3-year running entertainment podcast, have still yet to see Lord of the Rings nor read it. I don't know the story of Lord of the Rings.
All right, you're missing out on the movies, man.
Everybody tells me that, but
I've offered to let you stay like a full day at my place where we just sit down and do nothing but watch the movies.
Yeah, well, we should do that. I just don't know when.
We'll carve out a day.
Yeah.
And we'll have to prepare, get snacks.
Knowing your fiance, Michael, if we were to do this, number one, it would probably be a lot more people. And number two, there would be mead and like turkey legs. And like she would just go all out on the different serving dishes to come along with it.
One of my favorite things recently has been on TikTok, people imitating the scene of the King of Gondor eating his food real gross like while people are riding into battle and dying. Like just doing that at restaurants. Yep. But yeah,
anyway,
so, perfect movies. The Princess Bride. But yeah, it was a novel. Like I said, written by William Goldman. And one of the unique things that I came to discover about it that I never would have thought is the framing of the book is quite different than the framing of the movie. And this is one of those things that never would have been able to accomplish in movie form. So I'm very glad that they chose what they did to be able to adapt it in the movie in the first place. So the biggest difference is that in the novel, it's very similar setup where it is the actual author, William Goldman. It is him as a child, sick with pneumonia. And his dad comes from a fictional country, Florin, which is where the Princess Bride takes place. And he is reading this story of the Princess Bride to him as a kid. And essentially, as he grows up, he eventually marries, William Goldman does, and he has kids. And he wants to be able to tell that very same story to his kids. And so what he does is he goes out to a local bookstore and he's able to find a copy of The Princess Bride. However, he starts reading it in preparation to read it for his kids. And he realizes as he's reading it that it is not quite the same story. One of the biggest notes of it is that essentially his dad, much like how in the movie, likes to abridge things and take out all of the boring parts and the unnecessary parts.
See, that answers a huge question I had from the movie, which is how the fuck did the grandpa read that whole book in like one day? The answer is he absolutely did not.
Yep. He was absolutely skipping over all of the boring parts.
Right.
But yeah, and so what the actual book is of The Princess Bride is the story of William Goldman retelling this story and trying to recreate the experience that he had as a kid. So it is him rewriting The Princess Bride and him trying to come back up with that version that his dad did. So it comes with like notes that he's writing to himself of like, yeah, and then this thing happens, but it's not really important, so we're not going to worry about it. Or there's like notes of like his wife saying like, yeah, you should like, I'm like his notes about his wife being mad at him for taking out other parts. And it's kind of like a meta commentary of him retelling. It's like 4 layers of storytelling and framing deep, and can become quite complex.
That's incredible. Crazy. That reminds me of, weirdly enough, like another really great frame narrative is, this is kind of harping back to my In Defense of Adam Sandler, but bedtime stories is a lot like this too, in a sense, where it's like, yes, there's the story being told, but there's also the things the kids are adding, and that's changing the entire like spectrum of the story being told.
Yeah, it really just kind of like it makes it such an easy to, even though like it adds layers of complexity, it does make it an easier to digest story, because you know that everything that's being told is with this meta narrator who is willing to take out all of the more complex parts of it and kind of give it to you in this way that's meant to be told through voice. But yeah, and one of the cool things that I really like about it too is that like it takes like, so the story itself is based off of like a Renaissance era like fantasy story, but it also is like cemented in real world. Like everything that's happening is happening on this fictional continent of Florin, but then you also have someone like Inigo Montoya, who is from Spain somehow. He is the Spaniard, and you have Vizzini, who is from Sicily.
Yep.
So it's this really weird concept of like a fictional land within the real world, meant to be this cementing factor to it. So it's like it never reaches levels of fantasy that require like deep lore dumps, or which I love in any book, but it never requires any like big suspension of it has suspensions of disbelief, but not like to the point of like, yes, I'm in the fictional land of Middle Earth and I have to know what Mordor is or who Sauron is in order to understand the baseline of the story. It's like, oh, okay, we're just people who live in a castle and we're doing like that era things just with some magic dust on top. Hence why we get people. Yeah. Hence why we get people like Andre the Giant, who, even though he was very real, is played up quite a bit in the movie. Or why we get rats of unusual size.
So fun fact about that. And so he actually didn't do any like major lifting during that whole movie. He had actually pulled a muscle and was in, so he was basically in rehabilitation during the whole movie.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
He is one of my, even though I think this is really the only movie he really acted in, to this day, just by his depiction in the movie, one of my favorite actors of all time. It's like, it really just does not take a lot, but this movie just does such a good job of playing to his strengths and who he is as a person, that it really just is the perfect casting for it.
Funny thing about the casting. So, you know that the actor that they ended up choosing isn't the same actor who they ended up going with.
For Andre the Giant's character?
No, for Wesley's character. So originally it's supposed to be Colin Firth. So
interesting.
Yeah.
And so Colin Firth, What has he been in? Because I remember
The
his
Kingsman.
face.
Well, it's the most notable one that I know. We were talking
Right.
about this with Alex earlier, and I think he said that there was something else as well.
He was definitely in The Kingsman. I don't know if he's one of the many. Yes, he is in Love Actually, because he's the one who falls in love with the woman who can't speak English, and he learns her language for her, and she learns English for him. And then what else? He's in a lot.
I can pull up his whole list of things if we really want to get that deep into it.
We don't got to get into it.
But yeah, he's got a lot of acting credits. He's a very notable actor.
Gotcha. So instead of him, though, they went with Carrie Ellis.
Yeah.
I think is an incredible choice and was one of those like late 80s, early 90s heartthrobs that was just like a big flash in the pan for a little bit and then just disappeared.
Yeah. I think the only other movie that I know him from is Robin Hood.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
and like two very similar movies too. Like they both have a very similar kind of comedic way of doing things. I mean, they're very different in a lot of ways, but they both have that same kind of like sensibility to them, and you can really see like that kind of centers around who Carrie Ellis is as an actor.
Exactly.
Yep. But yeah, so just to kind of like go through the plot of The Princess Bride, now that we have like nailed down the framing of this movie. So essentially the plot of this movie is you have Wesley, who is a farmhand who grows up being ordered around by Buttercup. Wesley is her farmhand on her family's farm. And basically, as they're growing up, Buttercup is just, Wesley, do this, Wesley, do that. And every time that she asks Wesley to do anything, Wesley responds with, as you wish.
Another notable line.
Yep. And these two essentially grow up together. And as they are going and doing things, she kind of learns as she's growing up alongside Wesley that, oh, wow, she does love him. It's just, he will do anything for her if she were to ask, because everything that she ever asks him to do, he responds with, as you wish. But eventually, Wesley goes on and he leaves the farm and he goes to put his own life together. And it's during this time where he leaves that Buttercup is summoned to the castle, where she is set to marry the king of Florin, whose name I do not remember. It's something very strange. What is it? Prince Humperdinck.
Prince Humperdinck, the one who they based Lord Farquaad off of.
Yep.
Oh, Chris Sarandon's. Yeah, that's the actor for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I think in the Shrek episode, we talked about how Lord Farquaad is also a parody of the Disney producer.
Yes, his face is based off of that, but the outfit he wears is pulled straight from The Princess Bride.
Right. Okay. That's right. Because originally his name was Lord Fuckwad instead of Lord Farquaad. For more information on that, go listen back to the Shrek episode, which is one of my favorites. But yeah, so she's set to marry Prince Humperdinck, who is essentially just trying to look for the most beautiful woman in all the land, who happens to be Princess Buttercup. But Princess Buttercup does not want to go along with the marriage, and so she resists at all points. But eventually, she is captured by Vizzini, Inigo, and what is it's not just Andre, Fezzik, that's his name. Captured by all of them to be held ransom for a fortune, because that is what they do. All led by Fezzik, the Sicilian, who are just the best triplet of characters.
They had really good banter.
Yeah, you have Vizzini, who is supposed to be like the charismatic, smart planning leader. You have Inigo, who is the drunkard swordsman, who has nothing on his mind except to get revenge on the six-fingered man. And then you have Ezek, who is just the giant who's just coming along. And the thing is like it tries to play everything of this threesome off as like the stereotypes that you would see them for, but it's all kind of tried to be done through the viewpoint of Vizzini, the leader. Except it's very easy to see that everything that Vizzini thinks that he is, he's not. And everything that he thinks that Inigo and Vezic are, they are not. They're much more than the characters that he makes them out to be. But everything does fall in line with his plans no matter what. But it's during this process that they're trying to capture Princess Buttercup that the Dread Pirate Roberts, legendary legendary bandit of the seas, catches onto their tail for some unknown reason, and tries to go back and capture Buttercup. We later on find out that the Dread Pirate Roberts happens to also be Wesley, who he took over the
spoilers.
Well, it's how old is this movie? This movie came out.
It's like 30 years old at this point.
Yeah, we're fine.
Just don't do any kissing because that's gross.
Speaking of kissing, so they the chemistry between Buttercup and Wesley was actually real. That was off camera and on camera.
Yeah, that clocks.
Yeah, the Princess Buttercup was Robin Wright, which
Also a terrible name, by the way.
Which she was Jenny in Forrest Gump.
Oh my god!
Yeah,
this is the first time I've made that connection.
Yeah, I've never made that connection.
Yeah, it's just 7 years later.
Yeah.
But yeah, so at this point, like, you all, I mean, I feel like everyone remembers so much about this movie because so much of it sticks out. What for you all is like the biggest things that stick out about this movie at this point? It's like you got the meta narrative of the grandpa telling the story to his grandson, but then you also have the actual story being told.
Can I be honest?
Go for it.
So the thing that sticks out the most for me was the moment where I was like, oh, the Dread Pirate Roberts is a very interesting character. Basically when I was like, oh, I'm rooting for this guy, like that moment, honestly, it's from the moment you meet him. But if I had to pick a moment where like he won me over and I was like, hell yeah, this guy needs everything, it was when he is sitting at the table, and it's like, you can't trick a Sicilian,
Yep.
And he's like, well, how do I know that you didn't switch these when I turned my back? But you've already thought of that. So you switch it like this and that and the other. And he goes, ha, you've been bested. And, he drinks it and so on and so forth. That moment is like the Princess Bride moment for me.
Oh, absolutely.
That is a really good moment. And I would second that as well. But I mean, the sword fight is another good scene.
Yeah.
On top of that.
With Inigo.
Yeah.
Them both starting left-handed and then eventually revealing that that's not their dominant hand.
Exactly. Yeah. There's so many, like I said, you talked about this too, is that there's so many notable scenes in this movie that we could go for days on this.
Yeah. I mean, it's really hard to not like just devolve this entire podcast right now into just quoting the movie back and forth at each other.
Marriage.
Marriage. Yeah.
Sweet marriage.
It's one of those things where it's like there's so many pop culture references that are for this movie that you don't realize come from it until you go back and rewatch it.
Yeah.
And there, like, it's especially difficult too because there's so much about this movie that can easily be like misconstrued for like a Monty Python film. For the longest time, I always thought the marriage came from like Monty Python and the Holy Grail
because the character looks like he's from Monty Python.
Exactly.
Like all the other ones, you can argue look semi-normal, but then you see the priest and you're like, what?
Well, and then it's also like names like Prince Humperdinck, or fighting like a six-fingered man when that is very much like a Black Knight-esque situation. But yeah, and there's just so much about this movie that just like I hadn't seen it for a good 10 to 15 years until I saw it again about like a few weeks ago.
Yeah, man.
And it's every single detail continues to stick out with you, even after so much time has passed. One that I always remember is when Wesley is trying to navigate the swamp with the rodent of unusual size.
Mm-hmm.
I remember being 6 years old and watching that scene for the first time and freaking the fuck out.
Yeah, that's pretty trippy.
Yeah, like it's one of those things, like looking back on it now and rewatching it, like the rodent unusual says, like, oh, okay, like this is some cheapo, like practical effect.
It's very clearly a man in a rat costume.
Oh yeah. But like at the time it's like, oh my god, like that's the most real depiction and it freaks me out. And...
Rats can get that big,
right? Exactly.
Rats can get that big.
Yeah, it's like when watching the Star Wars movies and seeing all those practical effects and just being like, oh, that's real life. Like the Force is real, lightsabers are real. I hope to God I don't ever see Jabba the Hutt in real life.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Little do we know, we absolutely would in every Walmart across America.
Oh my god.
Exactly.
They just happen to be on the scooters.
It's always the scooters.
Yeah, it's the only way Jabba could get around. In fact, I don't think we ever.
Jabba would have had a scooter, I'd have lost my mind. Especially if it had one of those little horns on the front that's like.
Either that, or like I'd love it if Jabba just like used his puny little arms to lift up all of his body goo, and he's just got two tiny little dingly legs.
What if, even worse, Jabba the Hutt stands up from a sitting or a laying position, and it's just like the most beautiful pair of like 80s bombshell legs, and he's like wearing stilettos, and he's just like clicking as he walks away, and we're all like, whoa. That
emulates very like, who wears short shorts? I wear short shorts. Kind of energy.
Incredible.
But yeah, and so we see Wesley, as we alluded to, and we talked about, you see him make his way individually through the trio. First through Inigo, then Fazzini, or through Fazzini, and then Vizzino. I think I completely butchered those names. But Fezzik and Vizzini. There we go. If you haven't learned by now, after 100-something episodes, names are not my strong suit. But yeah, and each one is to be a different test of Wesley's skills. So at first it's sword fighting, then it's his strength against the giant, and then his wits against the Sicilian. Overcoming all of them in ways that feel like they might not actually be tests. But yeah, it's once he's reunited with Princess Buttercup, he tries to not let up his disguise until the very moment he says, "As you wish," and all the memories come flooding back to Princess Buttercup. Yeah. But it's at this exact same time that Prince Humperdinck and his crew come gallivanting along the meadows and come across them and re-kidnaps Princess Buttercup in exchange for Wesley. When they offer him freedom to go about his life on the open seas, they make a deal with Princess Buttercup that if she decides, or if Wesley does come back within the month that they give her, month or so that they give her before the wedding, then she can go off and be happy with Buttercup. What she doesn't know, though, is they have captured Wesley to be tortured and to be kept underground for the entirety of the month. And this is where we start to see characters like, I believe Mel Smith was a guy who was playing I think his official name is the Albino, the guy who is leading the torture, which we would only really know Mel Smith from. Only thing I've seen him in was National Lampoon's Euro Vacation. Did you all ever? He was the hotel manager in that.
I don't think I've seen that.
I was gonna say that's not a movie I've watched before.
Gotcha. So like the whole National Lampoon's Vacation series with Chevy Chase, Dana Hill, Jason Lively, that whole crew. Only shows up for that one. Not really a big outstanding actor, but was one that always stuck out to me from The Princess Bride. But yeah, and it's during this time where after he overcomes the trio, Inigo and Fezzik go off and try to live out their lives in desperation. And we see them fall back into the habits that they used to have. We see Inigo trying to fight an entire bar. You see him passed out drunk outside. Fezzik just trying to put something back together to find purpose. And the thing that I love is that they give Fezzik, the character who's supposed to be the dim-witted strongman, the guy who also happens to be the biggest heart, who acts as the glue for everything in this entire movie. Just falls right in line with that stereotype that I'm just a big fan of. The big teddy bear.
Gotta love Andre the Giant.
God, he's so good.
Such a great.
But
he died in when he was 40 or something. He wasn't very old.
He died super early from heart failure. I mean, he had I don't remember the name of the disease, but he essentially he had giantism. His body just never stopped growing, and he I think it was just his body got too big for his heart, and it just couldn't pump the blood.
That's crazy.
Granted, I'll give Andre the Giant props too, though. That man figured out how to live life to the fullest.
He did. There's many pictures of him living life to the fullest.
One of my favorite stories is of him just crushing 2 16-packs of beers on a 2-hour flight.
Yeah.
It's the man, I mean, when you look at it though, you see pictures of his hands holding a regular can of beer, and his hand just engulfs it. Just makes it look like a Barbie toy. Let's see. But yeah, so at this point in the movie, we have Princess Buttercup waiting to be rescued from the situation by Wesley. And this is where we get another memorable quote. It is when she dreams of the wedding procession, and you have the old hag, just the boo, boo, that just always sticks out.
I mean, the cast list in this movie is absolutely insane. I just remembered from you saying the old hag and remembering who said old hag is. Do you guys know?
No. Who is it?
Carol Kane?
Yes.
Is that it? Yeah.
Correct. Which is just absolutely insane because Carol Kane is super famous, and you know who plays Carol Kane's husband in this movie, right?
Well, no. So is it the same person? Because I think the lady who yells at the dream wedding procession is not the one who's married to Billy Crystal.
Is it not?
I don't think it is.
It's been a while since I've watched the movie, I will admit. But still, Carol Kane is definitely in it and married to Billy Crystal. You are correct.
Mm-hmm.
And the grandson, believe it or not, Fred Savage.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really?
Nuts. Fred Savage, also the brother of Corey Matthews, in case you didn't know.
Oh, God.
What? What, Michael?
Boy Meets World. I still have never seen it.
It's really good.
I know. It's a whole piece of childhood TV that I just completely
I didn't watch it either. That's where Topanga comes from, right? That's that. Yep. Yeah, I haven't watched it. So my cousins were a huge fan of that show, and I would come back from school and get off the bus or whatever and go to their house, and never once did I watch it.
You missed out.
That's what I've heard.
It's on Disney Plus.
Yeah. But yeah, so at this point, we have seen so much of this movie that we've seen all the cleverness and the wit that has come into play at every step, which makes it it is the main thing that really stands out to me about this movie. Everywhere you turn, there's just something layer and layer deep that is not necessarily so overly smart that makes you question whether or not you can keep track of what's going on in the movie, but it's just little
Rick
tiny
and Morty.
Right, exactly. but just surfaces that are just layer and layer deep that even a 6-year-old can follow. Because at the end of the day, this is a children's book, and I love that it never steps outside of that bound. Even though it has the gross stuff like Wesley and Buttercup kissing and all that stuff that like you don't care about until you're actually invested in. Like, no, do they kiss? But yeah, and along with all that, you get the extra layers of the kid actually like getting invested in this story as it goes on. It starts off with him just being like, I don't really care, Grandpa. Like, all right, you can tell the story. Like, yeah, okay, there's fighting in it. That's cool. And then over time, you just see him get more and more invested, develop that emotional connection. But yeah, so what we've kind of been trying to talk about this movie as we go, like to figure out like what is it about it that makes it a perfect movie. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We've got the wit, we've got the characters, we've got the actors, we got everything about it. Really, because to me, at the end of the day, like you can't have a perfect movie that doesn't accomplish everything that it sets out to be.
Yes, but I think that to kind of further your question, what is it specifically that makes this the perfect movie? And I think there are answers to that question.
I would love to hear what your answers to that question are.
Well, let's break it down. First off, what makes a good movie? I think that the easiest way to kind of come up with this is just to rattle them off as we come up with them. But one of my main things is relatable characters, or characters in situations that can be relatable. I think one of the very strong points of this movie is the fact that the band of characters for whom we are following all are likable in some way, shape, or form. Even the, guy from Sicily who is, kind of annoying is still struggling to maintain leadership, something that we've all experienced. So when you're seeing it, you're kind of rooting for him like, oh, come on, man, pull your people together, get this done. You got the giant who just wants to be lovable and just be friends with people, but his size makes people assume that he's this mean guy. You have the fighter who is meant to be this dangerous man who's hunting people down and killing them, but at the end of the day, he's just looking for, revenge against someone who had wronged him and his family. And even, the Dread Pirate Roberts, you root for him. The only people whom you don't root for are the ones who barely get any screen time, but act as the main antagonists, which are the prince and the prince's right hand, which is, it's true. You kind of don't think about it too much when you're watching the movie, but they each don't get many scenes that aren't directly just tying them to being the antagonist. Like, they are not 3-dimensional characters, but you do get heroes who are 3-dimensional characters.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's necessarily makes it the perfect movie, but what I will say is it fulfills the first strike, which is to have a relatable band of characters for whom the audience can place themselves in.
I agree. I'd also say that the movie doesn't take itself seriously as well. Like that's,
man.
I feel like a great part of it is that even though it's this great movie and whatnot, the biggest thing is it doesn't take itself seriously. So you can enjoy laughing with these characters and all this other stuff. So
to sort of take that to the next level, I would say while this movie, you're right, does not take itself seriously, if the audience member were to take it seriously, it still holds up. Like if you look at it as a fairy tale, it holds up just as much as it does as a parody of a fairy tale, which is great. Because at the end of the day, you still get the princess gets to be with the one that she loves, which is like pretty much what you look for in a staple, quote unquote, fairy tale. Because this, if we're talking about framed, this movie's plot is framed in the skeleton of a fairy tale with the sort of meat and, this venue of a sort of comedy, it has all of the life of a comedy with all of the structure of a fairy tale. That's why this movie is well known for being one of the inspirations for Shrek, because Shrek is like super based in that same space where it's like, yes, this is a fairy tale, but it's also tongue in cheek because we realize how ridiculous fairy tales are and we're going to call that out. But at the end of the day, if you look at just the plot structure, it's like, okay, you got this guy who is not understood by many people. He goes out, he rescues the damsel. Him and the damsel fall in love. There's some sort of a climactic issue that needs resolved, and then the falling action. So it still follows that same trail.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, that makes it widely appealing to all audiences.
Yeah, I mean, it's just in the same way that like Hercules or Sleeping Beauty or Snow White are from Disney. But usually, like when anyone watches this, they've already seen all those, so they know how fairy tales typically go. So when this does decide to invert itself a little bit, invert that idea, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I get it.
Mm-hmm. So what else? We have a band of likable characters who are relatable, a plot that is widely distillable throughout either fandom that you go towards, and I think it also is nostalgic in a way off the bat, because there are parts of it that echo what we've already seen in entertainment, but take it to new heights. So like we're all familiar with the fairy tale, quote unquote, story and world in which it takes place in. You know, you got your Sleeping Beauties, you got your Snow Whites, and all of that had been on the sort of public eye for years and years and years before The Princess Bride came out. So there was already this idea of what a princess was in society's mind. So there's a certain nostalgia that just comes kind of packed in with this idea of a Princess Bride movie that's more meant for adults. Not only that, though, I would say there's also nostalgia in the idea of just a family member sharing a story with you. That's something that once it starts, immediately you have buy-in.
Yeah, and I mean that goes exactly back to the original book. It is someone recalling a time where they had a close connection with their father, and it brings about this whole emotional idea of having like creating memories.
Yeah,
to the point where you want to recreate those memories with your own kids,
and that carries through that sort of fatherly relationship. Not only does it carry through to the grandson and the grandfather, but also what's kind of the first thing that starts the plot of the Princess Bride is the relationship between Princess Buttercup and her father.
Yeah.
It carries straight through. Now, the Dread Pirate Roberts, we never really get to see his parents too much, but I think it carries more through immediate buy-in than it does continual watchability, if that makes sense. Like
it's those parts they probably skipped out onto. That's the thing, is like this has been condensed. You know, never know what you missed out on. So
that's beginning to be one of my favorite parts of The Princess Bride, is that the Princess Bride story is not real. There is no Princess Bride, right? You cannot read
as we know
doesn't exist. Yeah. What is this?
No, like you can't read The Princess Bride. It doesn't exist. What exists are interpretations of The Princess Bride.
Right. Yeah.
So the story, however it was meant to be told, or even the true events, if it's been passed along for so long, we won't know. We'll never know, and we're not meant to know. It's the idea that.
But I want to know.
It almost makes it so that the Princess Bride movie is a sequel to the Princess Bride book.
Yeah.
Which is wild.
I love the idea that it is like someone in a similar situation to the original book. It's just another grandpa's retelling it to their grandchild in a completely different family. And it's just this idea of telling stories in a way to make it easily digestible for a kid to understand.
Yeah. And, that's what stories are all about. I think another thing that kind of makes this the perfect movie is the idea that it is written for adults with kids in mind, right?
Yeah.
It's a very realistic look at fairy tales. It's not like, oh, everything's perfect all the time. It's like, no, sometimes things suck. Like, and sometimes people almost die. And sometimes you get poisoned and your legs don't work so good. And the magic person in the woods isn't always going to solve all your problems, but they're also not always evil. Sometimes they're just dumb, and that's okay.
Yeah. I mean, it takes a lot of these ideas that we experience like throughout growing up. Like one of my favorite parts about it is like whenever the kid starts to complain too much, the grandpa outside of the story is just kind of like, well, it seems like you're getting a little too like emotional about this. I think you're just tired. You need to lay down. And it's like the kid like, no, grandpa, I'm fine. I got this. We can make it through.
I mean, I think if we're talking about immediate buy-in, and I'm just kind of, I don't know why my brain tonight is going towards movie making and less movie watching, but you know, you can't leave work at the office. But when we talk about immediate buy-in, what I mean by that is, and I keep mentioning it, so now I'm just going to give you guys a full-blown explanation, is movie making is a lot like catching a fish. You need bait. And then once they're on the hook, you got them, you know?
Yeah.
Then it's just about reeling them in. So the Princess Bride is so aware of that concept because it knows if it wants general appeal, it needs to have buy-in both from people who came to see a princess movie and for the people who got drugged to a princess movie, right? So how do you do that? By immediately giving those people who don't want to be there a character to latch onto and to use as sort of an avatar for their being there. And what's the first thing that happens is the grandpa walks in and says, I'm going to tell you this story. And the little boy's like, fuck this. I don't want to listen to a fairy tale. That's dumb. And that's immediate buy-in for anybody who was there to basically make fun of the movie. Because it's like, we're going to make fun of the movie before you can. So catch up.
I now that I like think back on it, it's like,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's like now that I think back on it, like that kid really is like from the get-go, was like, man, fuck you, grandpa. I just want to play my video games.
Yeah, man.
I just want to play my Tecmo Bowl.
What's that one song that's like, I don't want to work. I just want to play on these drums all day. That's like his attitude the entire movie.
Yeah, but it goes back to it's not taking itself seriously, and it punched the joke first that it's not taking itself seriously.
And that's good movie making.
That is good movie making.
And that's just really on Rob Reiner just being fantastic at writing movies over and over again. The man just knocked it out of the park in the late 80s, early 90s.
Absolutely. To kind of add another pillar of perfect movie making, because this really is kind of the perfect movie. And I guess it kind of harpens back to not taking itself too seriously. But at the same time, it never speaks down to the audience or makes the audience the fool. Like you'll have in like a James Bond movie where he's like, well, if I find the circumference of the this, that, and the other, and then I plug this into here, and then this is attached to this. It's like, I know I'm not supposed to understand this. They're talking down to me because they want me to know that he's smarter than me, right?
Yep.
At no point do they do that. In fact, they set the tone of the movie at whatever the modern man's like wherever their logic sits, that's where this movie sits. It never goes above it. It only goes below it. And when it goes below it, it's to say, hey, you're smarter than this guy. Our main character is also smarter than this guy. You are at this level. And that better helps people attach to that main character.
Right. Well, and it's also
a kid's book too. So
yeah,
that kind of helps it.
Well, and to go along with that,
with adult themes.
Yeah. To go along with that, though, it's like anytime it does present someone who's supposed to be this intellectual, it's like intellectual to the point that they're an idiot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
it's
they're
like
making a fool. Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing that I love the most about it, and I keep harping back to these two, but Billy Crystal's character is like not smart, not skilled. He doesn't understand why it works either. He's like, I don't know, just take it. You know, like, shut up, just do it. I don't know why my wife's over here. You know, like that. Yeah. So like, it's not even a moment of like, hey, I need you to buy into this. It's like, I don't care if you buy into this or not. This is what's happening. And that's what frame narrative is like the understanding that this story is being told through a grandfather who knows that he has to get his grandson to buy in and that the boring stuff isn't going to do it.
Yeah.
Like that frame alone makes this the perfect movie because it's speaking to the audience. It's saying, I know maybe you don't want to be here. If you do want to be here, great. I already got you. This movie is made for people who don't want to be here. And because they don't want to be here, I'm going to make them want to be here. And it works really well.
Yep. Honestly, I think that is the perfect way to end this episode and just revel in like how great of a job this movie does at one, being an adaptation, and two, getting that buy-in and creating this frame narrative that stands out to this day.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey,
For sure.
Pat, we're so excited to have you here and to be a host on Entertain This.
Again, thank you guys. I appreciate it.
How's
It's been a while since I watched the movie, so like I was reaching at some points, but
he did research before this. Did you know that? A little inside baseball. Wow. He had fun facts ready at the ready. I was so proud. Yeah, so I hate to do this, but Pat, I'm kicking you out because we're bringing Chloe back, and Chloe's going to do the quick this with us with our guest from last month. Hattie is coming back after this musical break. We'll be right back.
Sounds good.
And we're back. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for sticking with us, and I'd also like to thank Hattie, who has returned from last week's episode to give us a quick this. How are you doing today, Hattie?
Pretty good.
Thank you for coming back onto the show, making some more time for us, because this is definitely not the same week that you were on the show before. This is a different week, a different one entirely.
Exactly.
Right. So we gave you sort of the rundown of what a quick this is. Did you bring something to do a quick this on this week?
Yeah.
Great. So let's bring up your timer real quick. We got it ready. And Michael, give us the countdown.
All right. 3, 2, 1, go.
All right. So if you listen to the last episode, you know I'm from the heart of Kentucky, Central Kentucky. So in my hometown, there was this cool little group from around the 70s, early 80s called the Cornbread Mafia. Why is it called the Cornbread Mafia? I don't know. I just go with it because we're country as hell. So the Cornbread Mafia originated because there were not factories in my hometown area. So people could not make money unless they were farming, right? Which is fine. There's plenty of farmland. But people needed to figure out something else to do because they wanted a little more money. So you know what people did? They learned how to grow marijuana. And so there was this guy named Johnny Boone, and he went to California, and he learned how to grow marijuana. He brought it back to Kentucky and ended up being like, apparently they said it was some of the best weed from Kentucky because we have something called limestone in our grass. Actually, limestone is the reason why you'll find bluegrass in specific parts of Kentucky.
Whoa!
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
I think that's right. You might want to fact check me, but
that's also what makes bourbon Kentucky bourbon is the limestone.
Limestone and the water is what makes bourbon so good.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, so they learned how to grow weed in Kentucky. There is actually a whole book about it. And actually there's about to be another book about it. It's a memoir, and it might be from one of the people mentioned in the Cornbread Mafia book. But this Cornbread Mafia book goes back and talks about this man named Hyleen George, who was actually my grandfather's best friend. And Hyleen George used to own this little bar place called what was it, like 68, some Club 68. And actually Ike and Tina Turner played there, and that's like one of our biggest things in the whole wide world. But anyways, so Hyleen got connected to Johnny Boone, and they created this whole network of pot growth. And like they even reached out to like Kansas, and it's a whole wild ass thing. And Johnny Boone at one point was on FBI's Most Wanted for marijuana growth and distribution. He was actually caught right before COVID in Canada, and he went to jail, and then I think he got COVID or was released from jail because of COVID. But yeah, so we were known as the #1 place for marijuana growth there for a hot minute in Marion County, Kentucky.
I don't think Johnny Boone was his real name, was it?
No, it's his real name.
Oh, yeah. We're probably allowed to talk about it. It's fine. It just sounded like it might not be.
No, there's a whole book. Like his name is known
He's doxxed. It's fine.
Nice, we're
He's
good.
doxxed at this
We're not
point.
doxing him. That's the important part.
That's
We don't
the
know where he is
important
right
thing.
now, and that's the important part.
Right. I don't know where the hell he is now. I don't
Could
think
be anywhere. Did you know
Could
him
be anywhere.
personally? Did you ever meet him?
I did not know Johnny Boone personally. My dad knew Johnny Boone. And
That's
actually
your
a lot
6 degrees of separation.
If you check out this book, The Cornbread Mafia, I was like texting my dad when I was reading it, and I was like, holy shit, this shit happened in our hometown? Like, what the hell? And then there's this whole section about murder in this book, and I was talking to my dad, and I was like, what the fuck? Who is this guy that murdered people? And Dad goes, yeah, that guy actually had dinner at your grandma's house. I'm like, what the fuck?
Grandma, you were inches from death.
I'm like, Mama, you were hanging out with these murderous people. Oh, there's another good story from this book that is also connected in association with Hyleen George. Hyleen George is dead, so we can talk about him as much as we want.
Great.
But there was this there was a heist at GE Appliance in the 70s, 80s-ish. And basically Hyleen got somebody to steal all these air conditioning units from Louisville, GE Appliance. And he ended up giving them to one of these convents. So all these sisters were like, yay, we're getting air conditioning units at a discount. Woo! Go Hyleen!
Go sisters.
No, they were stolen. So he gave these sisters a stolen air conditioning units. And actually my grandmother, so my granddaddy, he passed away late 70s, and after he passed away, my grandma's air conditioning unit quit working. So she got somebody to come and fix this air conditioning unit. And the guy who fixed it, he's like, now, why is a serial code marked down on your air conditioning unit?
I don't know.
And they all was like, I have no idea. What? Because she really didn't. She had no clue, but she got one of those air conditioning units.
That's crazy.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
So what's the title of the book? Because I feel like that's what people are going to be looking for. It's
called The Cornbread Mafia.
All right.
Excellent.
Look up that book, go buy it, read it, because it sounds like an awesome read.
Also, you were absolutely right. When Kentucky was underwater, tiny bits of shells from marine creatures degraded over time to form a layer of limestone, which is rich in calcium carbonate. That calcium grew up into the grass, which is why Kentucky racehorses are so healthy, because their bones are fortified with that sweet Kentucky calcium.
Woo!
Boom!
That was a wild fact check that came out of left field, but I appreciate it nonetheless.
They asked for it. They were like, fact check me. And I said, okay.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I have a lot of random knowledge, and sometimes I question myself, and I'm like, how
Get
do
it.
I know that?
Did I make that up?
I
Is
make
that going in
that
my
up?
next novella? Who's to say? Hattie, thank you again for coming back on the show. Is there anything else that you would like to plug this time around?
Make sure you check out Smokin' Queers on Instagram. My Insta and TikTok are Hattie Cincinnati. I'm performing with Smokin' Queers on July 29th, and I'm performing in Lexington on July 30th.
And if you want to know who Smokin' Queers is, you should listen to our last episode where we had Hattie on to talk about all things burlesque, drag, and the Cincinnati LGBTQ community. It was an awesome episode. You guys should go back and listen to it. Until next time, if there's anything in the realm of entertainment that you want to hear us talk about, there are a couple of different ways that you can throw us suggestions. And if we like your suggestion, we might just make a show about it. The best and easiest way that you can throw us suggestions is to go to our website, www.entertainthis.net/ET-podcast. Scroll all the way to the bottom. There's a little questionnaire there that you can fill out, and it goes straight to us. Or you can email us directly. Our email is entertainthispodcast@gmail.com. You can also find us on Instagram. We are Entertain This Podcast. On Twitter, we are Entertain_this. And on Facebook, we are Podcast Entertain This. And as always, entertain us so we can entertain you, and you can entertain this. See you next Friday. Goodbye.
Bye.
This episode of Entertain This was written by Michael Savoya, with additional commentary by Patrick Frazier and Alex Steele. Our showrunner and resident fact-checker is Chloe Price. Our theme music is Rush Bubble by Aaron Spencer, with interstitial music by DJ W. Tune in every Friday for new episodes, and thanks for listening.